And at this point, we are pretty much done with the sign-up form. Like, our sign-up form is working, and we've got error messages when things don't work on the controller layer. Just like we've got this working, we've got the flash and everything. But you might notice that we haven't tested for everything. So, for example, we haven't tested for the presence of these error messages. We haven't tested anything about the structure of this sign-up page. And part of the reason for that is that I prefer not to test drive the views. Instead, I prefer to do integration tests at the end and just simulate going to the sign-up page, clicking on the button either with valid or invalid user data, and just seeing what happens. So this last step in the sign-up lesson is to write some integration tests for this. But I'd like to mention briefly at this point a testing framework called Cucumber at cukes.info. And I actually really like their webpage. I think it's cool. But I don't particularly like Cucumber. Like, it's okay. It's a little bit verbose for my tastes. I've gained a little notoriety for describing it as cucumbersome. And it is a little bit cucumbersome. But it does fill a niche. Apparently, people who do a lot of client work who want to show their tests to their actual clients and give them a sense of what the behavior of the application is really get a lot of mileage out of Cucumber. So take a look at it. A lot of people like it. I prefer the RSpec integration tests, but there are lots of different ways to test things in Rails, and this is certainly something to look at. So let's take a look at our terminal here and generate an integration test. Remember how to do this. Rails generate integration test, and then the name of the test minus the spec stuff. So this is just a test for users. We're going to use this for more than just sign up. So I'm going to use a generic users test, not to be confused with the user spec. This is a user's spec, as we'll see. Not to be the user spec is for the model, but this is in spec requests user spec.rb. So let's take a look at this. So in spec requests users spec. Maybe not the best name, but I'm stuck with it now. Here we go. We've got describe users, and I'm actually going to get rid of this in here because what I'm going to do is describe the sign-up process. So describe sign-up, and then I'm going to put another block in here actually to describe failure. And unlike the case of the controller test, you can see this, where we had a bunch of different things for failure and success. In this case, for an integration test, I'm just going to say it should not create a new user, or should not make a new user. So this test is going to be a simulation of going to the sign-up path and then filling in the name, email, password, and password confirmation fields with invalid values. So I'm just going to use blank values. And then at this point, I'm going to test a couple of things about the result of this. I'm going to make sure that it does render the user's new template. We've tested that once already, but it's no problem to have a little redundancy. It's a good idea in general to have a little redundancy. But in this case, I am going to test for some sort of error div. So let's take a look at how that works. So we've seen the syntax once before, but it's very nice. Visit sign-up path. And the next thing is new, but it's even more awesome if possible. This is fill in name. Now I'm going to space out to the right level. I pre-did this, of course, with, and then blank. And you'll see why I went out that far in just a second. But so what we're doing is filling in the name label with a blank. So if you look down here, this name here, let's just go up to the sample app here, sign up now. This name here, this is the label. And if inside of integration tests, if you put that label in quotes, it will visit the sign up path and then fill in the name field with these double quotes. You can also use the CSS ID if the field doesn't happen to have a label. So let's fill it in the other ones. Fill in email with blank. Fill in password with blank. I keep saying blank, it's really the empty string. But you get the idea. Confirmation, now you can see why I line things up this way with empty string. And then, what do you do after you fill in these things? You click button. So it's really amazing. So this is actually just going and doing the thing and clicking the button. Now we haven't tested for anything, but this is actually simulated going to this page and clicking the button. And so I'm going to test for a couple things that you might want to test for. I'm going to say the response should render template. And now we've done this once before. This is a little redundant, but it's not bad to have a little redundancy in our tests. Response should render template new. This is the new view corresponding to the new action in the user's controller. Inside this user spec, though, since it's an integration spec, we actually don't know which controller we're in by default. So we have to say users/new. And then I'm also going to test this this error. It should, let's take a look at this. If you sign up with blanks, and if you look at the HTML here, there's a div with an error explanation ID. And so let me just remind you that in CSS, this dot is a class, dot profile. If we did this, a hash profile, this would be the profile ID. And the reason I mention that is because we're about to use a syntax for that. It should have selector, then div hash with the ID error explanation. So now we're actually testing for the presence of this error explanation div. And there we go, 7 examples. We're green at this point. Now, remember, integration tests aren't usually used for test-driven development. We did a little bit with the routes, but we started green and we should stay green the whole way through this. All right, so there's one more thing we can do with this it test. Is we can put this whole big guy in a block. So let's see that. It's lambda do, and we're going to use the same trick we did before. We're really testing this thing end to end. We're saying we're going to go to the page, we're going to put in a whole bunch of stuff, and then we're going to say this should not change user count. Remember, this is what we had before in the user's controller spec. We've seen this once before right here. So let's just double check that. Should still be green. Good. And now let's describe success. It should make a new user. And now let's just do lambda do visit sign up path, fill in. So actually, let's just copy this. All of this stuff is the same. And we want to fill in valid values. So let's say example user with user at example.com, password foobar, click the button, and now let's say response dot should. Let's check for the actual flash message. Now in here we checked to make sure that the flash hash had the right key value pair, at least up to the capitalization of this thing, but it didn't actually test the existence of a flash message. Remember, that's in application.html.drb. That's where this is coming in. So inside the integration test, let's actually test for the selector. Should have selector. Now I'm going to use div.flash.success. Remember, this should have class flash and class success. And just as we did div, this is for an ID. This is for the class. This is inspired by the CSS syntax. And we can even say what the content should be. Remember that content will match any substring, so we're just going to do welcome there. And now I'm going to say response.should render template user/show. Now this might surprise you a little bit because here we say the response should redirect to user path. But inside integration tests, this sequence follows the redirect. So it actually will not pass if you say response should be redirect or response should redirect to some page. In this case, we can render the template users show. And of course, we're inside a Lambda, so we're going to say .should change user count by 1. And then we save it, and this is a really nice end-to-end test of everything in our application. Let's take one extra look at rerunning the whole test suite. And there we go. So now not only is our sign-up form working, but we've quite thoroughly tested it, and if anything breaks, we'll find out very quickly because our test suite should fail.